Hello, everyone. I'm Bhavya Tiwari. I'm a faculty at MCL. I teach courses such as Indian film, Bollywood and beyond, Cultures of India. I'm also associated with the World Cultures program. I also work with lots of students who are involved with the Frameworks journal. So if you're interested, work with me. All right. I want to first thank all of you who made this program possible. So a big round of applause for everyone who made this program, this fabulous program possible. Because really, this is a wonderful way to celebrate U of H, which, as many of you know, is one of the most diverse campuses in North America. And I really take a lot of pride in that I work here. I'm also very grateful to all my colleagues from MCL who are always willing to go that extra mile to show that U of H is a powerhouse of innovation and academic excellence. There's so much to learn from all of you, so thank you. And again, a big round of applause for all of you. Let me begin by saying that there is no better place in the US other than Houston to have a conversation about the issue of translation. According to a survey done by the US Census Bureau almost a decade ago, more than 25 languages were spoken in Houston between the years 2010 and 2014. I'm confident that the numbers have only increased. I mean, just a short stroll in Chinatown or Hillcroft is enough for anyone to appreciate the wealth of linguistic diversity, and may I also add, cultural wisdom that we have in the city of Houston. The title of our today's gathering is Translating Wisdom. The two South Asian artifacts or samples that we have here are in Sanskrit. One of the verses is of astrological in nature, though we do not know the source of that text. The other verse is from Mahabharata, one of the, or maybe the longest epic in the world. Instead of speaking on these two verses, I have decided to briefly speak about the idea of translation in South Asia, as evident in the living legacy of the ancient texts such as Ramayana and Mahabharata. I have decided to speak about these two texts in general terms because they are often seen as the treasure trove of wisdom and dharma. Now again, dharma is one of the words that's very difficult to translate. It's not religion. It means doing the right thing in the right moment in many South Asian languages. Moreover, these ancient texts, such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, have been translated, retranslated, adapted, readapted, transformed in so many languages and media that I would be remiss to not talk about them in a panel titled Translating Wisdom. Through these two texts, I want to highlight that that translation as a concept, both in theory and practice, is fluid in nature. This is evident in two ways. First, in the literal meaning of South Asian words that is often used for the English word translation, and in the very structure of these ancient South Asian narratives. I will first talk about the numerous words that thrive in South Asian cultures for the word translation. In the second half of my presentation, I will talk about how the structures of these ancient texts emphasize the fluid concept of translation. Now, you'll be surprised to know that in most South Asian languages, the word translation can be translated as, it can be translated into many words, but some of these words are anuvad, which means speaking after. Sometimes we also see the word translation rendered as rupantar, which means changing the form, or tarjuma, which means interpretation, or sometimes chaya, which means shadow. These words suggest that the translated is not an exact copy of the original. In fact, if anything, the South Asian language words for the word translation suggest that anything that has been translated is going to be a new entity because it is a product of anuvad, or speaking after something or someone. Now, since translation is an act of speaking after, it is also an interpretation, tarjuma, a change in form, rupantar. Moreover, because translation is anuvad, that is speaking after, it is always in dialogue with someone or something. And since it's in dialogue with someone or something, it's always a shadow of something. In all these words, translation appears to be a separate entity from the original, and yet it is creatively tied to its shadow, to the original. These South Asian words for translation do not carry with them the burden of fidelity and faithfulness that we often see in Western traditions. I do want to mention here that I dislike using the word Eastern or Western to categorize literary and cultural traditions, because binarized words flatten diverse communities that have their local intra and inter power dynamics and hierarchies. But to come back to the concept of translation in South Asia, the second reason how the idea appears fluid in nature, the concept of translation appears fluid in nature, is to analyze the structure of ancient texts such as Ramayana and Mahabharata. One could argue that the very structures of these narratives suggest the idea of speaking after. Ramayana and Mahabharata, as you know, are some of the oldest literary pieces in the world. Even though they were written in Sanskrit, many scholars have pointed out that the stories from Ramayana and Mahabharata have existed in languages other than Sanskrit for centuries. In fact, some scholars point out that Valmiki's Sanskrit Ramayana, which is often referred as the original text, has borrowed stuff from Jain and Buddhist traditions. Interestingly, most South Asians like me do not read Valmiki's Ramayana or Vyasa's Mahabharata in Sanskrit. They enjoy the text and the stories from them in literatures written in their local tongues and through television programs or cultural performances or films that are based on these texts. Since several stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata exist together as a whole, they challenge, subvert, and underscore each other. These stories are constantly, one could argue, speaking with each other, speaking to each other. Both Ramayana and Mahabharata, like most ancient Sanskrit texts, have a Russian doll structure, meaning each story is within a story. Each speaker is in a dialogue with someone, and each story has a purpose. Just to give you an example of this, from the Ramayana tradition, in 16th century, Tulsidas composed the story of Rama in Awadhi language. In the beginning of his text, Ramcharitmanas, or you could say, Ramayana of North India, Tulsidas tells his readers that he's going to render Valmiki's Ramayana in simple language so that it is accessible to common folks who are not well-versed in Sanskrit. Valmiki often enters Tulsidas's text to dialogue with him. Interestingly, Valmiki's Sanskrit Ramayana begins with Valmiki asking Narad, a god who is notorious for fueling all kinds of arguments, to tell him the tale of a man who is following dharma on earth. Narad, this god, tells the story of Rama to Valmiki, and Valmiki in turn tells us the story of Rama. Mahabharata also follows the story within a story structure. The story of Mahabharata or the Great War is told by a sage to the great grandson of Arjun, who wants to destroy all the snakes in the world by performing a fire sacrifice. Now this person, Arjun's grandson, wants to kill snakes because his father was bitten by a snake. His father was bitten by a snake because his grandfather, Arjun, from Mahabharata, had burned down a forest to establish his kingdom. In the process, Arjun had killed many innocent animals, destroyed the flora and fauna, disrupted the ecology, and killed many snakes. Vyas, the author of Mahabharata, narrates us the tale of Mahabharata by sharing the dialogue that ensues between Arjun's great-grandson and the sage Vaishampayan. Vyas also informs us in Mahabharata that he has not written the tale. In fact, he employs Ganesh, the elephant god, to write the grand story of Mahabharata. Both Mahabharata and Ramayana are described by their authors as the fifth Veda, imparting wisdom to those who can't read the Vedas. The story within a story structure is important here, and it's important to emphasize here because it shows that each speaker is preceded by several other speakers, creating a dynamic world in time and space where originals and translations speak to each other without worrying about the idea of fidelity. Perhaps that's the wisdom that we can draw from these ancient South Asian texts. Thank you.